Imagine you were part of a tribe or a small community that had their own morals of life and really just stuck to themselves while hunting and gathering the resources they need to not only feed themselves and their families, but their fellow tribes members or their fellow members of the community. Imagine having that kind of simplistic lifestyle, but miraculously one day you find yourself alone. Everyone you once knew is gone. What do you do? Well, that's the kind of scenario we get into today. This is the man of the hole from South America. To understand the situation more, we need to talk about two things. A, the Brazilian state of Rondônia, which the Tanaru, the tribe we associate the man of the hole being a part of, with, and we have to understand the relations between early settlers and indigenous people. And for those who have taken a 5th grade history class, you know exactly where this is going. But let's start with Rondônia, shall we? Now, Rondônia as a whole actually is believed to have homed the densest part of the Amazon rainforest, or at least some of the densest parts of the Amazon rainforest. But as of 2003, that the last recording I could find, it had lost about 70,000 kilometers by the turn of the century. And they had lost this due to illegal lumbering, illegal strip mining, and I've even seen people clear land for cattle ranching. Wild stuff. But at the end of the day, we cannot also forget that the Amazon rainforest was at one point caught on fire. Remember that? It was huge news. It was huge, baby. It just shows that the Amazon rainforest was not treated well over its years. It does get a bit dark because we need to talk about genocide. Genocide throughout history has happened a lot with indigenous people. And it doesn't just happen in the Americas, it happened everywhere in the world. Whether it was Africa, whether it was Eurasia, whether it was Oceania. There was a time where genocide just happened. And it's quite sad that it did. But in the 1500s, Brazil would actually be colonized by a Portuguese colonist named Pedro Alvares Cabral, who, during his stay in Brazil, decided to create a landfill in the Atlantic, which got many of the indigenous people sick, as well as treating them violently. And by treating them violently, I mean literally the people that were under his command murdered people, and it just gradually became a replacement of indigenous people with the colonists. They even enslaved people from Africa, and we're not even going to get into the disgusting acts of actually capturing and using these indigenous people for pleasure of sorts, shall I say. But it is stated that between the 1900s and 1957, so a 57-year span, 80 indigenous tribes were eradicated, destroyed, wiped off the planet. And that overall the indigenous population declined by over 80%, from 1 million to only having about 200,000 in Brazil. Now you might be wondering, well, why isn't it like America where they have, reservations that they can live on without being feared of death and all this? The thing is that the Brazilian government really put the indigenous people in limbo. And by that I mean they actually had plans to give them territories, to give them places they could call home. But it wasn't up until the people of the Tanaru tribe that we talked about earlier, the people that the man of the hole is part of, was already eradicated by the time it got passed. And now let's actually get on to talking about the man in the hole. Fast forward to about the 1970s, where the Tanaru, as well as two other tribes, the Akunsu and the Kanone, I believe I pronounced those right, will all face a similar type of massacre by Brazilian settlers. Now, while this won't completely eradicate these tribes, they will heavily be depopulated by this. But unfortunately, fate was not kind to that of the man in the hole and the rest of the survivors of the Tanaru. Whereas in 1995, illegal miners would actually kill all the remaining survivors except for the man in the hole, who somehow wasn't there. We don't know the true story of why he wasn't there. It wouldn't be until 1996 that the Brazilian government would find that the remaining settlement of those survivors was being bulldozed. And to that point, the man in the hole just lived isolated. Now, he didn't live a life of isolation by choice. It's the fact that no one knew his language. No one knew what language he spoke or how to actually speak it, nor did they know what his real name was or even what the actual name of the tribe he belonged to was. He only got the name Man of the Hole because over his time he would build 50 huts 50 huts in his entire life, kind of like a breadcrumb trail of his journey through hunting and gathering through the rest of his life. And in each one, they found similar holes that were about 5 feet deep. And it's very clear what these holes were. I don't understand why people are pretending they don't know. These were his poop holes, ladies and gentlemen. This is where the man in the hole did his number twos. And of course, from there he gets the nickname Man of the Hole. I'm of course joking about the whole poop hole thing. It is very weird. Maybe he just used it as like some sort of cold storage. Who knows? It's one of those things we'll just never know. Now you may be asking yourself, how is it that places like America, as well as other places in the world, have specially designated areas or territories for these indigenous tribes to settle in? Well, that was one of the things FUNAI, which is a kind of faction of the government that deals in indigenous peoples and Native American affairs and like protecting them and all that. They really tried pushing for this, but they found themselves constantly in limbo of it. But they actually did get a big W in 2007, where they got 31 square miles of land that was considered protected indigenous territory, which is nice. Funai continued to monitor the man in the hole after this, and unfortunately, in 2009, he would have a run in with some gunmen that tried to kill him. He thankfully survived the attack, though. And through Funai's relation with Man in the Hole, it's kind of nice to see. Funai kept an eye on the Man in the Hole as well as the Man in the Hole keeping an eye on them. Funai would occasionally gift him tools and seeds for him to use, and this engraved in him a sense of trust within them, where while a team was watching him, he motioned to a trap he had set for self-defense or hunting, whichever came first, and basically warned them like, hey, there's a trap here, don't step on it or you will be hurt. And it's something like that that's just like faith in humanity restored. And while at the time they presumed he was at his 50s, they just stated he's in good health, he's doing well. But this is where our story gets sad, because on August 24th, 2022, Funai would come across the corpse of the Man of the Hole. And before anyone says anything, they don't suspect foul play, they suspect natural causes, as he was found lying in his hammock ornamented in macaw feathers, and they are even quoted saying that it was as though he was waiting for death. At this time, he was about 60 years old, they say, and they assume the body was there since July. So he was there for about a month. And that was it. The end of the Tanaru clan, or as we call them, the Tanaru clan, and the end of the Man of the Hole. It's kind of a sad thing to see that the Man of the Hole was all we had as a look into the Tanaru's way of living and the Tanaru's hunting patterns and so on and so forth. He was an embodiment of an entire tribe. But it's also kind of awesome to see that even after his entire tribe was gone, he didn't abandon his ways of life. He didn't abandon his traditional ways of hunting or how his people did things. He went about his life as he would if his tribe was still there. And I would say a lesser man would just lay down and die if they had watched their entire tribe just be dwindled to mere numbers. But at the end of the day, that's the story of the Man in the Hole. A sad, tragic decline of an indigenous tribe that still happens to the tribes these days. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I'll see you all next time.